Welcome to the Quiet Scientist. Whether you've arrived by routine or by restless curiosity, I'm grateful you're here. Somewhere between the hush of the world outside and the quiet hum of your own breath, we're about to drift into something small, strange, and endlessly human, the shared mystery of a yawn. Tonight's question seems simple at first, almost playful. What makes you yawn when someone else does? But behind that gentle pull of your jaw, the widening of your throat, the rise of your shoulders, there's something old, something rooted in brain, in body, in story, and it spreads quietly like ripples on still water. One yawn, then another. Without a word, you're caught in a current older than language itself. I hope this story helps you ease into stillness, maybe even sleep, but I'll offer a gentle warning. This tale may be too curious, too comfortably strange to lull you to dreams right away. If you find yourself lingering, still awake, still listening, then perhaps you'll take with you something new to wonder about in the morning. Before we drift too far into tonight's story, a soft like or subscribe would mean the world to me, and it helps the quiet scientist continue growing quietly, one breath at a time. And if you feel like sharing, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. These stories travel far, from midnight kitchens to early morning walks, from quiet bedrooms to humming city trains. You're part of that journey. Just a small note before we begin. While we'll talk about bodies and brains, this isn't medical advice, just a sleepy reflection on something shared by all of us. Now, take a slow, easy breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Let your shoulders drop, let your eyelids grow a little heavier, and let's begin. Long before the modern brain came to name it, the yawn was already there, stretching across time and species, as old as sleep, as quiet as breath. It's not just human, not by far. Crocodiles do it, birds do it, even fish, in their flickering underwater stillness, have been seen to open their mouths in long, slow shapes we might call a yawn. It's a gesture older than language, older than laughter, perhaps even older than dreaming. And yet, even now, we don't fully know what it's for. There are theories, of course. Some believe it's a way of cooling the brain, like opening a window to let in the night air. Others suggest it stretches the lungs and jaw, resetting your posture when your energy dips. Some think of it as a signal to those around you and to yourself that something is changing, that you're shifting from one state into another. But tonight, our gaze settles not just on yawning itself, but on its contagiousness. That peculiar echo that happens when one yawn causes another. You've felt it, haven't you? Someone across the room tilts their head back, mouth wide, eyes fluttering, and before you can stop yourself, you're yawning too. Maybe even as you're hearing this, the word alone starts to stir something in you, a little tickle in your jaw, a tug at the corners of your mouth, the beginning of something slow. It's one of the few reflexes we don't resist. We don't hide it. It's not rude or alarming. In fact, it's one of the few things our bodies do that seems to invite connection without asking. A bridge between strangers, a thread of empathy between friends, a subtle way of saying, I feel it too. Imagine for a moment a fire-lit cave, tens of thousands of years ago. A group of early humans curled together, blinking at the flames. One yawns, then another, and somehow the whole group begins to shift towards sleep. Not because they talked about it, not because they planned it, but because they moved as one, a chorus of tired breath. That's the mystery we're walking into tonight. How does a yawn become a whisper in the brain? How does it leap from face to face like a soft spark? And why does it only catch in some moments, not all? As we continue through the night, we'll visit ancient stories, drift through animal behavior, and peek gently into the brain's reflective layers. You'll meet mirror neurons and sleepy chimps, silent social cues, and delicate psychological thresholds. You'll explore how babies yawn without knowing why, and why some people never catch the contagiousness at all. But before we move forward, let's sit here a moment longer in this space between knowledge and wonder. Imagine yawning not as an action, but as a threshold, a liminal breath, not quite asleep, not quite awake, a blink of the body's rhythm, caught between the tick of attention and the slow roll of relaxation. You've probably heard that even just reading the word yawn can make you start to feel it. That might be happening now, or maybe it's waiting for just the right moment. It's not a command, just an invitation, something quiet you share with creatures great and small, something that might say more about your mind than any word could. Contagious yawning may be strange, but it's not disruptive. It doesn't demand action. It doesn't interrupt. It slides in quietly, a mimicry born not of habit, but of connection. You yawn when others do, not because you're copying, but because something inside you recognizes the signal and opens to it. And maybe somewhere deep down, the yawn isn't just about breath or brain at all. Maybe it's about presence, noticing, tuning in, feeling the sleepy hum of the world around you, and letting it into your own chest. From here, we'll begin tracing the origins of this shared moment, from the yawns of lizards on warm rocks to the whispered beliefs of ancient people who thought yawning let spirits escape. It's a story woven through biology and myth, through psychology and poetry. And as you lie here now, listening, breathing, maybe you'll notice it happening again. A yawn rising without warning, a gentle sigh escaping, not to fight, not to resist, just to follow, just to feel. There's something magical in that, a gesture you don't control, shared without words, older than thought. Let's begin the journey there, at the very beginning of the yawn. You follow the feeling now, that drowsy tug behind the eyes, the weightless drift of thought, and begin to settle into a rhythm older than memory. There's something calming about imagining that the very act of yawning once rippled through creatures who never knew the names for sleep or breath or time. In this soft stretch of quiet, you begin to wonder if yawning came before language. What was it saying? The earliest records we have of yawning aren't written at all. They're fossil stills and shadowed movements, the echo of behaviors observed in animals that came long before us. Before speech, before storytelling, there was the open mouth, the long exhale, the slow reset of the body. It's been seen in birds perched under a warm sun, in lions stretched out under acacia trees, in lizards basking on ancient rocks, a wide jaw, a ripple through the throat, a slow settling back into stillness. The yawn speaks to something primal, something deeply embedded in the nervous system, a message whispered in breath and motion rather than in words. Even in animals without complex social bonds, yawning appears. Fish yawn, turtles yawn, frogs yawn. What could it mean in those quiet, scaled, and blinking bodies? Some researchers suspect it has little to do with tiredness at all, that it might be a neurological pattern, a built in calibration, a stretch that resets something we don't yet fully understand, like a silent tune up humming under the surface, something instinctual, automatic, always there. But something shifts when you look at animals that live in groups. In primates, for example, chimpanzees, bonobos, even baboons, yawning seems to take on a layer of timing. One chimp yawns, and another soon follows. The same thing happens in wolves and dogs, in parrots, and even rats. This echoing of the yawn becomes something more than individual regulation. It becomes shared rhythm. You imagine it now, a small troop of macaques in the shade, one stretching and yawning after a nap, another following moments later. There's no plan, no spoken cue, just a rippling of gestures, a kind of unspoken agreement. We're tired, we rest, we rise, together. And in that silent mimicry lies the seed of something uniquely social, something that doesn't need language to be understood, a biological call and response. Your body says, I'm shifting, and someone else's body quietly answers, me too. In this way, yawning may have served an ancient purpose, keeping group behavior aligned. If one member of the group began to grow drowsy or restless, others would sense it and adjust, not consciously, not strategically, but viscerally, subtly, through shared signals etched into the body long before the mind could give them shape. And that's where you begin to feel just how old this behavior might be. Millions of years old. Long before humans began painting on cave walls or carving tools from stone, this strange, slow gesture passed silently between living beings, a flicker of coordination, a breath of agreement. There's a kind of poetry in that, a rhythm without a drummer, a dance without a choreographer, just a movement felt, sensed, mirrored, the beginnings of empathy, maybe not in thought, but in motion, the body recognizing the state of another and subtly echoing it back. And even now, after all the words we've invented, all the complexities of thought and conversation we've built, that ripple remains. You still yawn when someone else does, without needing to understand why. That automatic echo lives on, like a gentle fossil in the nervous system, a remnant of a time when understanding didn't require speech. Imagine it again, but this time with your own body. Maybe it's morning, the first light slipping past your curtains. You catch your reflection stretching into a long, satisfying yawn. Your shoulders rise. Your breath pulls deep, and even though you're alone, the motion feels familiar, instinctual, almost shared, as if your body remembers the days when others would join you. In these small moments, you start to notice how much of you is built from echoes, from rhythms carried forward over time, the way your breath slows in darkness, the way your eyes blink heavier when the room quiets, the way a single yawns can tug at your muscles and invite your mind to follow. You're not just thinking about sleep, You're embodying a pattern that's passed through generations: animal, human, forgotten, remembered. And when you think about it like that, the idea that yawning could be communicative, even without meaning to be, doesn't seem so strange. It becomes a kind of bodily Morse code, one you never learned but always understood. It might even be the first kind of conversation the body knew, before greetings, before gestures, before the language of hands or eyes or mouths. There was the yawn, a full bodied exhale, a soft signal that rippled from one being to the next, unbidden and unexplained. And yet, despite how ancient and widespread yawning is, it remains oddly invisible in daily life. You don't think about it much, you don't plan it, you don't marvel at it, but it's always there, waiting in a meeting room, on a park bench, in the final stretch of a long drive. And when it rises, it does so with such quiet familiarity that you almost forget it's doing something remarkable. Perhaps it's that very subtlety that makes it so powerful. Yawning doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shout. It whispers. And in that whisper is the weight of millions of years, of creatures syncing their rhythms, of bodies speaking to one another without ever saying a word. So the next time you yawn, or catch one from someone else, maybe you'll feel that thread a little more clearly, the invisible line stretching from the past to the present, from one body to another, unbroken and soft, a gentle inheritance passed not through teaching, but through being. And as your breathing slows now, as the warmth of stillness begins to wrap itself more fully around you, that ancient gesture lingers at the edges, not to be questioned, not to be solved, just to be felt, shared, understood, without effort. You're not alone in your yawn. You never have been. And now, as the rhythm of breath carries you gently forward, you begin to drift toward a softer realm, the space where science and story intertwine like tendrils of early fall. You float past fossils and instincts and settle, for a while, among the stories that came before explanations. Before yawns were studied, they were noticed, and before they were noticed, they were feared, celebrated, misunderstood, and quietly mythologized. In the distant past, when the world felt more enchanted and the line between breath and spirit was easily blurred, yawning held a power that stretched beyond mere biology. In many cultures, to open your mouth wide in a yawn was not simply a matter of air or fatigue. It was an invitation or a risk. Ancient peoples often saw the yawn as a portal, a brief parting of the self. When the mouth opened and the breath drew long and deep, something unseen might pass through. The soul, perhaps, slipping free for just a moment, or a spirit lurking nearby, taking advantage of that open gate. Some believed that a yawn allowed evil to enter. Others feared that the soul might escape, if not quickly reclaimed. It wasn't just a reflex then. It was a vulnerable moment, a mystical one. That's why, even today, in scattered corners of tradition, people might still cover their mouths when they yawn, not out of etiquette, but from echoes of ancient protection. You imagine a time when covering your mouth wasn't politeness, but defense, a ward against spirits, a quiet signal to the unknown, not tonight, not this breath. In certain places, the yawn was seen as a message from the gods, a sign of something stirring beneath the surface. Perhaps you were receiving a dream, even while awake. Perhaps it was a warning. In old Greek texts, yawning was sometimes interpreted as a sign of impending illness or transformation. In other cultures, it meant the body was realigning with cosmic rhythms, the stars shifting, the moon calling, the seasons bending time forward or back. The yawn became a gesture not of sleepiness, but of realignment, a silent recalibration between the human and the divine. And there's something comforting in that, isn't there? The thought that a yawn, as ordinary as it feels, could once have been sacred, could still carry with it the faint shimmer of meaning, like dust caught in golden morning light. It's easy to forget how much of your body carries old stories, but in the slow stretch of your jaw, the slight squeeze of your eyelids, the quiet sigh at the end, there's history there. Memory, myth, lingering in muscle. Even the word yawn feels ancient. It echoes through language in shapes that are soft and round. In Old English, the word was ganion, to gape, to open. In Latin, hiatus, a gap, a cleft, an interruption. Yawning was a kind of space, a pause, a moment of emptying. Not a weakness, but a widening. You imagine an ancient poet, wrapped in wool, watching someone yawn by the fire, and rather than losing interest, he leans closer, intrigued. He sees not boredom, but mystery, a gateway, a signal that something has shifted, that this person is entering a different state, not entirely here, not quite gone, just somewhere in between. That liminal space, that in-betweenness, is something yawns seem to dwell in. They arrive at the edges of sleep and wakefulness. They appear in moments of change, before speaking, after crying, while waiting. They live in transitions, in thresholds. You never really decide to yawn. It happens when something else is shifting, something deeper than thought, something closer to the ancient tides of your body. In some tribal rituals, a group yawn was seen as a moment of alignment, a collective softening of boundaries, a way to say, without words, we are together now. We breathe together. We move as one. And when you consider that yawns are so easily caught, it makes a kind of sense. There's a magic in that silent contagion, a shared surrender. One body begins to slip, and others follow. You've probably noticed it in rooms without even realizing. Someone across the room yawns, and then another, like dominoes falling in slow motion. It doesn't matter how alert everyone was before. The ripple moves through them, gentle and sure, as if their bodies were listening to something their minds could not yet hear. There's a tenderness in that idea that even in ancient times, long before brain scans or psychology, people sensed that yawning meant something shared, something not fully in our control, something passed between people, quietly, invisibly. Maybe that's why the stories lasted, because even if they were wrong in the details, they were right in the feeling. Yawning does feel like opening, like letting something in, or letting something go. And tonight, as your breathing deepens, as the lines of thought grow softer, you can begin to feel it too, that slow widening of the self, that almost imperceptible tug just behind the eyes, just above the heart. You don't have to fight it. You don't even have to name it. Just follow the path of air, the slight shiver of muscles as they stretch and release. You might not believe that a spirit is nearby or that the stars are whispering through your breath, but you can still feel the ancientness of it, the weight of thousands of years carried in something as light as a sigh. You can still be moved by the small truth inside the myth that your body knows how to soften, how to open, how to echo the world around it without needing instruction. And in that, there's wonder. The yawn is not just the beginning of sleep, it's the end of holding, a release, a letting go of structure, of story, of expectation. It returns you gently to the space between things. And maybe that's where rest truly begins, not in stillness, but in that soft, shifting breath that invites stillness in. So as you continue listening, letting each word fold into the next like waves on calm water, notice the feeling returning again, that subtle lift in the back of your throat, the jaw relaxing almost involuntarily, the breath pulling deeper, fuller, heavier. You're not just learning about yawns, you're living them, carrying them forward, just like the ancients did. And that makes you part of the story now. One open mouth in a long, unbroken line of breath. Your breath now moves without instruction, slow and unhurried, as if the story has taught your body to listen in its own language. There's no rush here, no goal but gentle wondering. And as you rest deeper into the softness of this night, a quiet question begins to emerge, not about others, or ancient stories, or invisible echoes, but simply, why do you yawn at all? It seems like something you should already know. You've done it thousands of times, in childhood, in classrooms, on quiet bus rides, in conversations when your brain drifted elsewhere, during pauses in music, or just before the lights went out. Each yawn arriving like an old friend who never says hello, only sits down beside you, sighing. But the answer isn't as tatey as you might expect. Yawning, it turns out, doesn't serve one single defined purpose. It's a shape with many meanings, a reflex with several doors. Some scientists believe that yawning cools the brain, that when you draw in a large breath of air, it helps lower the temperature of your head, refreshing you slightly, like cracking a window in a stuffy room. Your brain, after all, functions best in a narrow thermal range. Just a few degrees of heat can fog your thinking. So a yawn might be your body's way of fanning the mind. Others point to its role in alertness, not in putting you to sleep, but in waking you back up. That big inhale stretches the lungs, increases heart rate, and shifts blood flow. It activates parts of the nervous system that prepare you to respond. In this way, a yawn can act as a reboot, a tiny reset button when your attention begins to blur. And yet, yawns also appear when you're sleepy or bored or transitioning between tasks. They bloom during long drives, before speeches, at the end of long films. So maybe they're not just about oxygen or temperature. Maybe they're also about state changes, about moving from one mode of being to another. You start to feel this in your own body now, that strange in-between sensation that yawns often bring, not quite tired, but not fully awake, not disengaged, but not sharply focused, a place between gears where something is shifting inside, but not loudly. In this light, yawning becomes more than a reflex. It becomes a marker, a soft signpost planted on the road between now and what's next, a bodily punctuation mark that tells you something is ending, something else is about to begin. And still, some theories suggest that yawning is a social signal, a visible display that tells others something about your internal state. I'm slowing down. It says, I'm changing rhythm. I'm not in danger. I'm ready for rest. Or maybe I'm ready to focus again, like a lighthouse turning its beam. The yawn flashes briefly, saying, look here, a transition is happening. But perhaps it's not one answer we need. Perhaps it's all of them, woven together into something richer. Maybe yawning is like a language with many dialects, each shaped by circumstance. A cool down here, a warm up there, a stretch, a reset, a pause, a quiet call, and maybe that's why it's so hard to study, because yawning doesn't always show up the same way. It's not predictable like a sneeze, not diagnostic like a fever. It slips in and out of context. Sometimes you're tired, sometimes you're focused, sometimes you're neither. It appears and disappears like a shadow in the corner of your mind, familiar but elusive. You begin to sense this flexibility as something beautiful. Yawning isn't just one thing, it's a shape your body takes when it needs space, space to breathe, to transition, to feel. It doesn't rush, it doesn't demand, it simply arrives, stretching you open just enough to begin again. And what's more, you rarely fake it. It's difficult to yawn convincingly on command. The body seems to hold ownership over it. It doesn't yield easily to performance. Even actors struggle to summon it without true feeling. That tells you something, doesn't it? That the yawn is rooted deep in a place below speech, below will. It comes when it's needed, not when it's asked for. You begin to recall the last time it surprised you, maybe in the middle of a sentence or while brushing your teeth, that sensation of your body stepping away from your mind just for a moment to do something older than reason, something you couldn't quite stop and didn't really want to. There's peace in that surrender, in allowing your body to do what it knows. A yawn isn't failure, it's not laziness, it's wisdom, quiet, embodied wisdom, a recalibration, tuned not to clocks, but to need, and it links you to others in ways you don't often notice. Because when someone else yawns and you catch it, your body isn't just echoing, it's recognizing. It's saying, I know this rhythm too. I understand what you're feeling. Even if the moment is fleeting, even if no words are spoken, something passes between you, and yet there are times you yawn alone, not shared, not seen. These yawns feel different, more private, more internal, like a personal sigh, folded inward, a release that no one else needs to know about. Those yawns have their own beauty, their own stillness, so whether it's social or solitary, cooling or awakening, the yawn meets you where you are. It doesn't judge your reason. It doesn't require explanation. It just happens gently, steadily, and often exactly when you need it most. And now, as your eyes soften further and your breath becomes heavier, you feel it again. That fullness rising in the chest, the wide mouth, the slight tremble of your eyelids, the subtle stretch of your arms. Your body isn't asking a question, it's answering one. That's the secret, perhaps, that yawning isn't a mystery to be solved, but a message to be trusted, one that says, pause here, let go here, begin again, when you're ready. So you stay in that breath, that space, that slow and sacred in between. That breath you're in now, the one that lingers just a little longer in your lungs, the one that almost feels like it wants to become a yawn. It's more than air. It's a reflection, not a mirror made of glass, but of something softer, something hidden behind your eyes, behind your thoughts. And tonight, as you rest here in the hush between ideas and dreams, you begin to understand that yawning, especially contagious yawning, might be your mind mirroring the world. You don't always notice it happening. Someone yawns, and you feel it, not through logic, not through decision, but through a kind of quiet recognition, a ripple echoing across a still pond. One body shifts, and another gently follows. There's no reason to mimic a yawn. You're not gaining anything by copying, and yet you do. So what, exactly, is being reflected inside your brain, nestled deep in the folds of the frontal lobe, are tiny circuits called mirror neurons. These aren't ordinary messengers. They fire not only when you do something, but when you see someone else do it. They light up when you watch a hand reach for a cup, when you hear someone laugh, when you observe a smile tug at someone's face, and, it seems, when you witness a yawn, your brain doesn't just observe, it participates, silently, invisibly. The mirror neurons act like an internal echo, replaying what you've seen as if you had done it yourself. It's not imagination, it's simulation, and it might be the root of empathy, your ability to feel what someone else feels, simply by witnessing it. It's a beautiful thought, isn't it? That your brain is built not just for action, but for understanding. That inside of you is a quiet stage where others can be rehearsed, relived, known, without them ever asking to be. You've felt this before in other ways. The wince when someone stubs their toe, the clench in your stomach when a voice trembles, the smile that rises uninvited when a child bursts into laughter. You feel others in your body. You always have. And yawning might be one of the oldest traces of that ability, the most primitive thread in the tapestry of shared emotion. Contagious yawning seems to rely on this empathy circuit. It doesn't happen in babies until they're a few years old, not until their mirror neurons are active enough, their social awareness sharp enough to understand that someone else's state can reflect into their own. And it doesn't always happen in everyone. People with certain neurological conditions, like autism spectrum disorder or schizophrenia, sometimes show reduced yawning contagion, not because they're incapable, but because the mirroring might work differently. So when you catch a yawn, when it sneaks into your chest and stretches you from the inside out, you might not just be echoing movement, you might be echoing feeling. Your brain, in its gentle way, is reaching across the space between two selves, saying, I feel that too. There's a quiet intimacy in that, a kind of invisible conversation. No one has to speak, no one has to explain. One person yawns, and the other follows, and in that moment, their bodies are momentarily aligned, like dancers in the same breath, like birds adjusting wing beats to stay in formation, like waves moving not one after another, but as part of a shared rhythm. And it's not just humans. Chimpanzees are close evolutionary cousins, yawn contagiously too. especially when they see a member of their group do it. But even more intriguing, they're more likely to catch the yawn if it comes from someone they're emotionally bonded to, a friend, a family member. The strength of the connection makes the mirror clearer. The closer the bond, the more likely the ripple. You've experienced this, haven't you? You're sitting with someone you love, perhaps in silence, perhaps in a long conversation, and they yawn without thinking. Your body mirrors them. A little stretch, a slow inhale, a blink of shared awareness. You weren't bored, you weren't tired, but something inside you leaned toward them and said, "Yes, me too." That kind of leaning, emotional, neurological, might be part of what makes us human. Our capacity not just to know ourselves, but to sense others, to reflect them in the theater of our own bodies, not as strangers, but as kin. And still, yawning remains delightfully odd. Why does this particular action, more than blinking, more than stretching, more than breathing itself, spark such vivid mirroring? No one can say for certain. Perhaps it's because it's so visible, so exaggerated, so hard to fake. Or maybe it's because it always arrives anonymously, uninvited, a soft truth the body tells when it forgets to pretend. You could imagine yawns as emotional lanterns, small flares that signal presence, transition, fatigue, openness, and when one appears, your mirror neurons flare up like moths to the light, drawn not by logic, but by design. You don't need to analyze, you just feel, and the yawn becomes yours. This mirror of the mind, this strange, beautiful system of internal echoes, is what makes so many things in life quietly magical. It lets you grieve with someone you've never met, laugh at a face you've only just seen, cheer when others win, sigh when others rest. Your brain is built not just for thinking, but for joining. And in the soft space of tonight, as your eyes grow heavier and your limbs feel like driftwood floating gently on still water, you can feel those reflections becoming quieter, gentler. The world around you, though distant now, still tugs at your breath, your body, your being, and somewhere in that half dreaming place just before sleep, you yawn again, not because someone told you to, not even because someone else did, but because you remembered what it felt like to feel, to echo, to belong silently, sweetly, sleepily, to something greater than yourself. So you let the mirror soften, let the thoughts settle, let the next breath carry you forward, not toward answers, but toward stillness. The mirror fades, and in its place, something more primal stirs beneath your skin. A softness that isn't yours alone, but shared, something older than memory, something carried in the instincts of the body. You begin to sense it now, not as a thought, but as a rhythm. The way yawns ripple not only from person to person, but from creature to creature, in forests, fields, and dens where words never existed at all. Yawning, it seems, does not belong to humans. It was never ours to begin with. The breath that opens your throat and stretches your face has been passed down through millions of years, through warm-blooded fur and cold reptilian scales, through feathered flocks and silent herds. It echoes quietly in the bodies of animals who live and move together, bound not by speech, but by shared breath, shared attention, shared stillness. You picture a pack of wolves beneath a blue dawn. The night has passed, and their limbs are heavy with rest. One wolf yawns, a long, jaw cracking stretch of teeth and tongue and breath, and without hesitation, another follows, then another. It's not mimicry, it's not intention, it's something deeper, like tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency. A signal passed through the body, without thinking, without needing to be named. Scientists who study these creatures have noticed something beautiful. Contagious yawning happens more often among bonded pairs, wolves that hunt together, groom each other, sleep side by side. The yawn moves more easily between those who trust. It's a reflection, yes, but also a kind of agreement, a readiness to shift, to rest, to act together. And it's not only wolves. Primates show the same pattern. Chimpanzees, macaques, bonobos. The closer the social connection, the more likely the yawn will travel. Friends catch each other's yawns more often than strangers. Mothers and infants sometimes share yawns without even making eye contact. There is something here beyond logic, beyond mere proximity, a biology of belonging. Even among birds, parrots, and budgerigars, yawns pass quietly from one to the next. In flocks, where noise and motion swirl constantly, this gesture still finds a way to ripple softly through the group. And in rats, even under the cold lights of laboratories, the effect appears again. One yawns, then another, a chain of motion tied not to cognition, but to connection. So, what is the purpose of these shared yawns, passed silently from body to body? Some researchers believe it helps synchronize behavior, that in animals who live in close quarters, who rely on group decisions, when to rest, when to move, when to stay alert, the yawn acts as a kind of clock, a subtle recalibration. Not everyone sleeping and waking at random, but breathing in unison, like musicians tuning before a performance. The yawn pulls them back into harmony. Others see it as a social glue, a way of reinforcing bonds without conflict. In many animals, direct eye contact or physical contact might be risky, misunderstood, too bold. But a yawn, it's harmless, it's safe. It signals openness, a calm, safety. A creature who yawns in front of you isn't afraid of being attacked. It trusts the moment. And when you catch that yawn, your body replies, I trust it too. And that idea of yawning as a signal of safety resonates in you now, doesn't it? You've felt it yourself. In rooms where you feel at ease, where laughter is soft and silence is welcome, yawns arrive gently, unguarded. But in places where you feel watched, judged, hurried, the yawns hide. Your breath stays shallow, your muscles remain on edge. Contagion doesn't thrive where trust is thin, so when yawning spreads, it may be more than tiredness. It may be a quiet, physical declaration of peace, of shared tempo, of mutual ease. And there's something incredibly moving in that. The idea that long before language gave us ways to declare closeness, our bodies had already found one, a simple gesture, an open mouth, a long, slow breath, and in response, a mirrored one. No need to say, I'm with you. The body already knows. Even domestic animals seem to reflect us in this way. Dogs, our closest animal companions, have been shown to yawn in response to their humans, especially when there's emotional closeness. A dog who loves you, who feels bonded to you, may catch your yawn the way a child catches laughter, not as a trick, but as a reflex of the heart, a subtle kind of empathy shared across species, across centuries of coevolution. And when you think about it, truly think about it, it becomes clear. Contagious yawning is not a flaw in the system. It's a feature, a quiet, communal function, a ripple of agreement, a bodily gesture that says, we are in this moment together, even if we don't speak the same language. It's strange to realize that such a small act, one you perform dozens of times a week, maybe even today, holds such deep evolutionary wisdom. But here, in the stillness of the story, you can begin to feel it, the breath behind the behavior, the connection behind the reflex. And now, as your own body leans further into this softness, you may begin to feel yourself as part of a pack too, not of wolves or chimps or parrots, but of humans, of yawners, of quiet imitators, a species that still, despite everything, feels through each other. The room you're in may be quiet, you may be alone, but somewhere in the night, someone else is yawning too, perhaps even listening to this very story, perhaps mirroring your breath without knowing it, perhaps connected to you in a way no wire or screen can replicate. Through body, through rhythm, through that oldest, simplest motion, inhale, stretch, sigh. You carry the echoes with you now, through your breath, your posture, your gaze, and even as your thoughts begin to blur at the edges, even as sleep tiptoes in more boldly now, you can feel the deep comfort of this truth, that you are never truly alone in your body, that the breath you take has been taken before, that the yawn you offer may be caught by someone else, gently, invisibly, somewhere else. That's the power of the pack, not the noise, not the movement, but the breath that binds. You continue drifting now, deeper into the quiet warmth of this unfolding story, each breath slower than the last. The room around you grows softer, gentler, like fabric folding in on itself, and somewhere in the hush, a small question begins to stir. If yawning is so natural, so ancient and contagious, why doesn't everyone catch it right away? Your mind reaches toward the beginning of life, not the prehistoric beginning, but the personal one, the curled fingers, the sleepy coos, the soft, unfocused eyes of a newborn baby. You picture an infant cradled gently in a caregiver's arms. The parent yawns a wide, slow stretch of the mouth, the kind that usually passes like a gentle wave between people. But the baby is still, unmoved. No yawn returns. It turns out that contagious yawning doesn't come naturally to the very young. While babies do yawn, even in the womb, as early as the second trimester, they don't seem to mimic yawns from others. At least, not right away. The capacity for a yawn to leap from one person to another is something that arrives later, slowly and quietly, like empathy tiptoeing in. Studies suggest that most children only begin to show signs of contagious yawning around age 4 or 5, sometimes a bit earlier, sometimes later. But there's a pattern, a delay. The mirror, so easily fogged in early childhood, only begins to reflect clearly when certain pieces of the emotional puzzle fall into place. And this tells you something remarkable, something profound, that the yawn you catch from a friend, a parent, a stranger on a train, it's not just a reflex. It's an expression of awareness, of emotional recognition, a sign that somewhere in your mind you are perceiving the other person as not just moving, but feeling, and that you're allowing that feeling to echo in you. Babies don't have that yet, not fully. Their brains are still under construction. The mirror neurons we talked about earlier, the ones that help us simulate and share the experiences of others, are still organizing themselves. The roads are being paved, but the traffic hasn't started flowing. And even more than biology, there's experience. A child must learn to see others as separate beings, and yet similar enough to relate to. That delicate dance of you are not me, but I can understand you takes time. It's not taught directly, it's modeled. It grows in the soft spaces between cuddles and tears, between giggles and stumbles. It grows in the watching. When a child begins to yawn back at someone, really yawn back, it's not just adorable, it's a quiet milestone, a whisper of emerging empathy, a sign that the brain and heart are starting to harmonize, that the child can feel what others feel, not in words, but in body. It's a beautiful threshold, this point where the body begins to borrow signals from the world around it. And in a way, it mirrors our entire journey through childhood. At first, we live completely within ourselves. Needs are urgent. Emotions are tides. The world is something that happens to us, but over time, we begin to sense that others are just like us, carrying their own waves, their own breath, their own invisible yawns. And once that realization arrives, the world begins to change. Not louder, not faster, just fuller. You notice more, you reflect more, you join in. This is why watching children grow can feel like witnessing magic. One day, they simply are. The next, they're with, they catch your smile. They mimic your mood, and yes, eventually, they catch your yawn. It doesn't happen all at once. Some children may begin mimicking gestures before they truly feel them. Others may show emotional sensitivity long before their bodies respond to something like a yawn. The timeline varies, but the underlying current is always the same, the growing ability to connect. And if contagious yawning is, in part, a sign of that connection, then it becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes a clue, a soft indicator that the emotional doors are open, that someone is beginning to recognize us as them and to feel what that means. For children with developmental differences, this connection may look different. Some may not catch yawns, others might do so unpredictably, or only in specific settings. This doesn't mean a lack of empathy. Empathy, like breath, comes in many forms. It may express through a gesture, a gaze, a silence. The absence of a yawn does not mean the absence of care. It simply means the mirror reflects in its own way. And for parents, caregivers, siblings, noticing the first shared yawn can be an unexpectedly tender moment. A simple glance, a stretch of the mouth, and suddenly a response. No words exchanged, no lesson taught, just a ripple passed from body to body, a breath that knows its twin. So tonight, as you lie still and remember the yawns of childhood, the ones that didn't echo back and the ones that eventually did, you can feel the beauty of that slow unfolding. The idea that empathy isn't a switch, but a sunrise, that it brightens gradually, casting light on everything it touches. And maybe that's part of what makes yawning contagious at all. The willingness to be reached, to open the door and say, even without words. Come in. I feel it too. Children grow into that openness, and somehow, in their own time, they begin to pass it along. You carry that same openness now, the same readiness to receive and reflect, shaped by time and tenderness. And as the story flows forward and the air around you stills, you might find yourself catching a yawn, not because you're tired, though you may be, but because something in you still remembers how to connect, how to echo, how to receive. It's not just biology, it's belonging. So you stay here, eyes a little heavier, arms tucked close, and let that small truth settle gently into you. You didn't always catch yawns, but once you did, you never stopped. And that means something. You stay still a little longer now, tucked in the quiet thought that yawns are not learned but caught, like floating pollen drifting from one open window to another. And as your breath deepens, your mind begins to wonder, what if you don't even need to see someone yawn in real life to feel that familiar pull? What if a picture is enough, or a sound, or even just a word? Yawn. Even here, reading this soft syllable in the hush of your evening, you might notice it, that invisible weight nudging your breath deeper, a tiny itch in the back of the throat, the beginning of a stretch behind the eyes. It doesn't take much, does it? You don't plan it. You don't analyze. It just happens. That's the strange and magical truth. Contagious yawning doesn't require direct connection. You can be alone in your room, watching a video of someone yawning, even a cartoon yawn, even a yawning animal, and suddenly, your body responds as if the gesture were happening beside you. No invitation, no discussion, just a shared breath across space and silence. Researchers have studied this with gentle curiosity. In dim labs and quiet offices, volunteers are shown clips of people yawning. Sometimes they're strangers, sometimes familiar faces, sometimes just audio, the long exhale without the open mouth. And again, the pattern emerges. People yawn back, not always, not on command, but often enough to feel uncanny. The brain, it seems, doesn't need full context to mirror, just the shape of the act, just the hint. You begin to realize how porous the mind can be, how much it lets in without permission. You don't have to decide to reflect something. You don't even have to be conscious of it. The act of witnessing, especially something so human, so primal, is often enough. And in this way, yawning reveals something remarkable about your brain. That it's not a closed system. It's open, responsive, like soft clay pressed gently into the shape of what it sees. Your thoughts may feel private, but your body is always listening to faces, to rhythms, to subtle signals in the air. Even the word yawn carries weight, even now, as it returns again and again on this page. It might trigger something in you. That's not hypnosis. It's not suggestion. It's simply the brain recognizing a pattern and responding, as if the nervous system sees the word, tilts its head, and says, "Ah, yes, I know this feeling," and perhaps even stranger. You can yawn just from imagining someone else doing it, not even seeing it, just picturing it, a familiar face stretching their mouth, blinking, breathing in that slow, full-bodied way. Your own jaw starts to ache, just slightly. Your breath falls into step. It's as though your mind has drawn the shape of the act so vividly that your body forgets it's not real. There's a lovely paradox here. Something as physical as a yawn can travel without touch, without sound, without direct experience. It moves not through air, but through awareness, through possibility, through suggestion so subtle it barely knocks. And that tells you something about how your brain handles empathy, not as a thought, but as a sensation. You don't have to decide to understand someone's state. You simply feel it. If your mind is open, if your attention is soft enough, if your guard is down. This may be why contagious yawning doesn't always happen in bright, busy moments. If you're distracted, if your attention is scattered, if you're braced and tight and focused, the yawn might pass right by. It doesn't force itself on you. It waits, like a shadow just outside the door, stepping in only when you're calm enough to receive it. That's why it often catches you when you least expect it, during silence, stillness, reflection, in rooms where people speak slowly, on walks without destination, in the quiet middle of a conversation, when everyone forgets what they were about to say. That's when it slips in. That's when the mirror clears. And here's another curiosity. The less you try to yawn, the more likely it is to arrive. Effort seems to block it. Intent stands in its way. Yawning, like empathy, is involuntary in the purest way, a gift your body gives when your mind steps aside. You may even remember a moment, perhaps in childhood, perhaps just last week, when you tried to yawn on purpose and couldn't. The stretch was incomplete. The breath felt awkward, but then, without warning, it returned on its own, full, free, deep enough to satisfy something you didn't know needed attention. That's the essence of contagious yawning. It's unforced, undemanding. It waits quietly in the wings, not seeking applause, just offering the gentle comfort of connection. A reminder that you are not sealed off, not isolated, not unreachable, even when alone. Your body still responds to the idea of others, and that, in a way, is a kind of grace. So as you lie here now, letting the quiet of the evening press more softly around you, you might notice it again, not from a face or a voice, not even from a picture, but from a feeling. The whisper of a yawn rising inside, not because you're bored or even sleepy, but because this whole experience, the listening, the imagining, the gentle unfolding, has created just the right space for one. You don't have to answer it. You don't have to catch it. But if you do, let it move through you freely, like a tide returning home, because sometimes watching is enough. Sometimes just the suggestion of a shared rhythm brings it to life. You are in this moment, not just witnessing connection, you are part of it. The breath you just took, the one that lingered a little longer in your chest, the one that almost curled into a yawn, feels like more than air now. It feels like a signal, a secret your body sends without words. And as your thoughts soften around the question of why yawns spread so easily, another curiosity rises beside it, quiet and shimmering. Is yawning really about sleep? Or is it something else entirely? You've always known yawns show up when you're tired, or at least that's when they're most noticeable, late at night, midday lulls, that sweet dip in energy that settles in just after lunch, when your thoughts start to slide out of focus, A yawn appears like punctuation, a gentle sigh that says, "Yes, I feel it too." But if yawning were only about tiredness, the story would be simpler, it would be predictable, yet it isn't. You yawn when you're nervous, before job interviews, during deep focus, after a long stretch of concentration. You yawn when you're bored, yes, but also when you're emotionally stirred. Actors often yawn before going on stage, athletes too, before big events. Not because they're sleepy, but because something inside them is recalibrating, preparing, shifting gears. So maybe, just maybe, yawning is not a message from sleep, but from transition, a sign that your body is moving from one state to another, from alert to restful, from still to active, from tension to release, a kind of gentle recalibration, a breath based bridge between moments. And when a yawn comes from someone else, and your body catches it, it might not be mimicking fatigue at all. It might be recognizing that shift, reflecting that change, responding not to tiredness, but to movement. You saw their state begin to soften, and something inside you softened, too. There's a quiet elegance in that idea, that yawning could be a form of coordination, not just exhaustion, a nonverbal cue that brings people into sync without requiring attention, like birds turning together in the sky, like dancers finding the same rhythm without counting. In group settings, this makes even more sense. If you're in a room full of people, a meeting, a classroom, a gathering, and someone yawns, the effect begins to ripple outward. One, then two, then a wave. Not always because everyone is sleepy, but perhaps because the energy in the room is shifting. The tone is changing, and your body, attuned to those subtleties, adjusts itself automatically. Yawning in this light becomes a kind of emotional barometer, a signal your nervous system offers, quietly and honestly, when it senses that something is out of tune or ready to realign. And when that yawn spreads, it doesn't just mean I'm tired. It might mean let's slow down, let's breathe, let's connect. That's why some researchers have begun to think of contagious yawning not just as an effect of empathy, but as a tool for cohesion, a form of social glue. The term might sound clinical, but it's beautifully simple. Social glue is anything that helps people feel more bonded, more in rhythm, more part of the same group. Smiling does it, laughter, sighs, eye contact, and perhaps yawning. It's hard to fake, hard to force, and when it happens, it's often unnoticed, yet oddly powerful. A moment of shared physicality that reminds everyone we're in this together, and that, perhaps, is why yawns catch more easily between people who know each other, family, close friends, romantic partners. The yawn doesn't spread simply because the gesture is visible. It spreads because the barrier between you and me is thinner, softer. Your body is more willing to mirror someone it trusts. This might also explain why yawns don't always feel appropriate in certain settings, why people suppress them in formal meetings or cover their mouths in polite company. Not because yawning is offensive, but because it's intimate. It suggests a shift in tone, a lowering of guard, a move toward rest, honesty, openness, and in some spaces, that's not what's being asked of you. Still, the body speaks anyway, quietly, truthfully, and you begin to see just how layered this small gesture truly is. A simple yawn may be tiredness, or it may be something more nuanced, a response to safety, to boredom, to readiness, to empathy, a nonverbal nudge that aligns your internal world with the rhythm around you. In this way, yawning joins the family of human behaviors that sit somewhere between reflex and language, like nodding, like sighing, like reaching out without realizing you've moved. These are the things we do not to speak, but to feel with. And that's what makes contagious, yawning so quietly beautiful. It doesn't require thought, it doesn't ask permission, it just reminds you, gently and honestly, that you are part of a shared rhythm, one that exists beyond reason, beyond planning, beyond even awareness. You've probably felt this in the most unassuming places: a crowded train, a waiting room, a moment of pause in a conversation. Someone yawns, then you, and in that moment, though you may not exchange a single word, something real passes between you, a thread of sameness, of breath, of presence. It's easy to miss, but if you notice it, really notice, it feels like a secret, like knowing the moon pulls on the ocean, even when the sky is cloudy, like hearing harmony in a room full of quiet voices, like catching a sigh from a stranger and exhaling in reply. So now, as your body settles further into comfort, you might begin to sense it again, that sleepy tug, that shared softness, not because you are exhausted, but because this moment invites it, because your body feels safe enough to lower its guard, because this story, these words, this quiet rhythm, they've given you permission to rest. And with your next yawn, if it comes, you might feel it not as the end of alertness, but as the beginning of togetherness. Not just sleepiness, not just breath, but a whisper: I'm here, and so are you. So you're here now, resting in that space where thought and breath drift together, neither leading nor lagging, just coexisting like old friends sitting in silence. You followed the ripple of yawns across history and biology, watched it pass between children and adults, animals and humans, strangers and companions. But beneath all those layers, under the sighs, the soft stretches, the unspoken exchanges, lives something quieter still, a subtle mimicry pulsing at the edge of your awareness. Your brain doesn't just see a yawn, it feels it, and often, before you even realize what's happening, it prepares your body to echo it. The face loosens, the eyes narrow, the lungs stretch wide, the diaphragm shifts, all of it choreographed without conscious permission. It's a gentle dance directed by the quietest part of you, a mimicry so precise, so ancient. It doesn't wait to ask if you want to join, it just begins. This ability comes from a network in your brain that knows how to reflect others, not in words, not in ideas, but in action. Mirror neurons, as they're often called, are scattered like soft lights through your motor cortex and other regions of the brain that link action to perception. When you see someone raise a hand, part of your brain lights up as though you had raised it. When someone smiles, your brain doesn't just understand it, it gently rehearses the movement. It's as if your brain is always practicing empathy, even in silence. And that's where yawning slips in, not as a decision, but as an involuntary agreement. Someone else's body shifts into that wide, open breath, and without any conscious analysis, your brain prepares to do the same, not out of obligation, not out of imitation, but because the signal is so familiar, so deeply wired, it's hard to ignore. But this mimicry is more than motion, it's mood, too. You've probably noticed how being near someone anxious makes you fidget, how laughter draws laughter, even when you miss the joke, how someone's stillness can make you still. These aren't just coincidences, they're evidence of something shared, something enacted before understood. In the case of yawning, this kind of reflection happens most often when the emotional space is safe, when the connection feels soft. That's why you might yawn more easily around people you love. Your body is more open to receive them. The mirror works better when the light isn't harsh. And if your brain is mirroring, then the yawn isn't just a thing you do, it's a thing you become, temporarily, quietly, part of a collective experience. A network of reflexes and feelings pass back and forth like breath in a choir. No conductor needed, just shared awareness. This might help explain why you can even feel a yawn coming before it happens. The moment stretches, your jaw aches, your eyes water, your chest expands, and yet it's not quite there. You're mimicking the shape of it before it fully arrives, like your brain is sketching the outline in pencil before coloring it in. And sometimes it doesn't arrive at all. It fizzles out. A half yawn, a missed connection, as if your mind changed course at the last second. But even that moment tells you something, that the process was underway, that your body responded to the signal, even if it didn't complete the gesture. You may have noticed this in conversations too, that delicate moment when someone else's posture shifts and you shift with them. They lean in, you lean back. They soften, you soften. Without thinking, you mimic. It's not obedience, it's resonance. In this way, your body is always listening, not just for meaning, but for movement. Yawning becomes one of the clearest signs of that. Emotion both visible and visceral, and unlike laughter, or speaking, or blinking, it's hard to control. It feels real in a way that's hard to fake, and perhaps that's part of its power. Your brain recognizes it as honest, unfiltered, a small window into someone else's state, and so the mirror responds, not as a command, but as a kindness, a gesture of trust. I see you. I feel that too. There's a certain sweetness in that exchange. The way one breath calls another, the way your body answers. Not because it has to, but because it can. Even when you're not fully paying attention, when you're reading, walking, daydreaming, the mirror still works. A yawn caught from the corner of your eye still pulls at your face. A whispered sigh still curls into your chest. The mimicry is gentle, almost imperceptible, but it shapes you more than you know. And perhaps this is why contagious yawning feels so human, because it connects movement and mood in the most seamless way. You don't have to think about it, you just do it. And in doing it, you join something, even if only for a breath's length. The brain, after all, is not just a thinker, it's a mimic, a dancer, a quiet harmonizer. You may remember moments where this was especially clear, times when you felt so in sync with someone that even your size matched. Your posture mirrored theirs. Your pauses came together like ripples meeting in still water. That wasn't planning. That wasn't coincidence. That was your brain doing what it's built to do, feel with, and yawning, small as it seems, is one of its oldest tools. So now, as your body sinks deeper into the comfort of this moment, your breath slow and steady, your limbs resting heavier against whatever cradles you, you may feel it again, not a thought, not even a sensation, but a permission to mimic, to join, to let your body follow the rhythm it knows so well. The yawn is not just something you do, it's something you share, something that ties you to others through a mirror you don't even know you're looking into. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to let go a little further, to let your next breath be softer, longer, deeper, like a whisper your body has been waiting to hear. Your breath is quieter now, slower, moving without effort, like a tide coming in under moonlight. You've followed the ripple of yawns through the mirror of the mind, through mimicry and motion, through rhythms so old they hum beneath your skin, and still, something delicate remains to be explored. A soft mystery, not of when yawns happen, but when they don't. Because for all their ease and ubiquity, contagious yawns are surprisingly selective. You don't catch them in every setting. You don't mirror just anyone. In fact, some yawns passed you by completely, as if your brain never noticed them at all. The mirrors, it seems, works only when it chooses to, or perhaps only when you choose to, in ways you don't even notice. One of the gentlest truths about contagious yawning is that it's most likely to happen when there's connection, not just visual proximity, but emotional closeness. You're more likely to catch a yawn from a friend than a stranger, more from a family member than a casual acquaintance, and far more from someone you love than someone you barely know. This isn't just sentiment, it's measurable. In studies, participants consistently mirror the yawns of people they feel attached to, parents and children, romantic partners, trusted peers. The response isn't random, it's relational. The yawn becomes a mirror, not just of motion, but of trust. You can feel this in your own memory. Think of a time you were curled up beside someone, a partner, a child, a sibling, and one of you yawned. The other followed almost immediately, no words exchanged. It wasn't a game, it wasn't polite, it was instinct. A physical nod that said, I'm close enough to feel what you feel, but contrast that with a different setting, a waiting room, a subway car, a classroom on a distant day. Someone yawns a few seats away. You glance, you register it, and nothing. No yawn in return. Not because you're resisting, but because the connection isn't quite there. The mirror remains fogged. So what changes in those moments? What keeps a yawn from catching? It may be that your brain, so finely attuned to social cues, filters its responses based on context. It doesn't mimic everything it sees. It chooses what to reflect and when. Emotional salience matters, familiarity matters, but so does your own internal state. If you're distracted, alert, under stress, or disengaged, the echo might not find you. The yawn glides past, unreturned, and then there are the moments when you try to resist. In a meeting, perhaps, where attention is expected, or in conversation, where yawning might seem impolite. You feel it rise, that gentle pull behind your jaw, and you push it down. You cover your mouth, you stifle it, you override the mimicry with a touch of social performance. But even then, the impulse was real. The mimicry began. You just interrupted it. There's a tenderness to that. The idea that your body wants to mirror, even when your mind says no. That the instinct for synchrony is always there, just beneath the surface, like a child waiting quietly to be invited into the room. And for some, the invitation never fully arrives. In certain neurological conditions, such as autism spectrum disorder, contagious yawning appears less frequently, not because of a lack of empathy, but because the systems that process and reflect social cues may work differently. The mirror still exists, but it reflects in its own time, its own shape. This reminds you that not all empathy looks the same. Not all connection follows the same rhythm. The absence of a yawn is not the absence of care. Sometimes the signals are simply tuned to another frequency, one that doesn't always show itself in breath and motion. But in most people, the yawn still finds a way through, quietly, softly, especially when the setting is safe, especially when the person across from you feels like home. And this is where yawning becomes something more than behavior. It becomes a form of permission to slow down, to shift, to say without words, we're okay now, because there's something inherently disarming about it, isn't there? A yawn is not threatening. It's not demanding. It's vulnerable in a way, open, soft. When someone yawns in your presence, they're showing you their inner rhythm, their edge of energy. And when you catch it, you're accepting that rhythm into your own body. You're responding not with thought, but with presence. And that shared presence doesn't always require eye contact or conversation. Sometimes it just requires nearness, the same room, the same silence, the same late hour. You may even notice that you yawn more frequently when you're beside someone you're emotionally close to, not just because they're tired, but because your bodies are moving together in time. Your nervous systems are whispering back and forth in quiet codes of breath and stretch and sigh. In these moments, yawning becomes something like a duet, a physical chorus of closeness, a way of saying, I feel your rhythm, and I let it blend with mine. But when you're alone, truly alone, the rhythm changes. You still yawn, of course. The body still needs to stretch, to shift, to regulate. But it's different. It's private, no longer a shared gesture, but an internal one, like a whisper kept to yourself. And yet, even in solitude, contagious yawns can still happen. You might yawn while watching a movie, reading about yawning, hearing the word again and again. Your body still reaches for others, even if they're only imagined, because the truth is, we are rarely completely alone. Memory, story, imagination, they populate the space around us. They bring others into our breath. They let the echo of a yawn still find us, even when no one is there to send it. So now, as you lie still in the fading light of this section, with your breath slow and the room calm, you might notice that familiar pull again, that little tug behind your eyes, the soft stretch forming at the corners of your mouth. And whether you yawn because of these words, or because of something older stirring in your chest, you can rest in the quiet knowledge that your body is still connected, still listening, still willing to answer, even when no one else is asking. You don't always yawn alone, even when you think you are. The thought lingers gently in the air that yawns often ripple between us, like echoes of breath passed back and forth through a quiet thread of connection. And yet, not everyone hears the echo, not everyone catches the wave. There are those for whom the ripple doesn't land, the mimicry doesn't happen, the breath remains entirely their own. You might think of someone now, perhaps someone you've known for years, or perhaps yourself, someone who seems untouched by contagious yawning. The room may fill with soft stretches and sighs, but they remain still, unmoved, untouched by the invisible current. It's not resistance, it's not indifference, it's just silence. This absence isn't a flaw, it's a clue, a soft doorway into a deeper question. Why doesn't everyone yawn when others do? Science has wandered into that question slowly, gently, like stepping into a room you're not sure you're invited to, because contagious yawning lives at the intersection of movement and emotion, reflex and recognition. The reasons why it doesn't occur can be just as layered as the reasons why it does. In some people, particularly those on the autism spectrum, the contagious quality of yawning appears less frequently, or not at all. It's not that these individuals don't yawn. They do, in all the ordinary, sleepy, transitional ways, but the echo seems fainter. The reflex that responds to others isn't always triggered, and that has led researchers to wonder about the subtle mechanics of empathy, mirroring, and perception. The initial theory was simple, that empathy itself must be impaired, but life rarely fits into such neat conclusions. Empathy isn't a single thing. It's not an on-off switch. It's layered, textured, expressed in gestures you can't always see. People on the spectrum may empathize deeply, fiercely, differently. Their empathy may not show up in automatic mirroring, but in quiet understanding, or careful listening, or profound loyalty. So perhaps it's not about a lack of connection at all, but a different way of connecting. You think again of mirror neurons, those quiet watchers in the brain that reflect what others do. For some, these systems may function more analytically or be less automatically engaged. The world is filtered more deliberately. The reflexes run a different path, and so the yawn doesn't spread. In other cases, it's about attention. Contagious yawning depends on noticing, really seeing the other person's face, the gesture, the breath. If your mind is elsewhere, if your focus is inward or scattered, the cue might never land. The mirror can't reflect what it hasn't seen, and then there are those whose minds are simply too focused, not absent, but hyper present, watching details, solving problems, organizing thoughts. Yawning is a soft signal. It requires stillness to receive, and some minds are rarely still. There are also times and states in which anyone might stop catching yawns. If you're anxious, for instance, your body's sympathetic nervous system is active, alert, protective. In those moments, your brain isn't looking to mirror others. It's scanning for danger, managing energy, mimicry retreats. The yawn goes unnoticed. Even exhaustion can block it. Oddly enough, when you're deeply overtired, your body may stop catching yawns because it's conserving. It doesn't have energy left to reflect others. It's too busy holding itself together. So what does this all mean? It means that contagious yawning is more than a party trick. It's a gentle indicator, not of compassion or kindness, but of availability. Availability to receive, to notice, to join. When the system is calm, when the connection is clear, the echo arrives. When it's not, it doesn't. That understanding brings a kind of compassion, doesn't it? For the moments when you expected to feel mirrored and didn't, for the people who don't always respond in ways you anticipated. The absence of reflection isn't rejection. It's simply where someone is in that moment. Maybe behind a wall of thought, maybe walking a different path. And that absence can be just as informative as the presence. When you notice someone not yawning with you, someone you'd expect to, it may tell you they're preoccupied, or overstimulated, or quietly retreating. Their silence isn't cold, it's just inward. So much of empathy is about noticing what isn't there, the unspoken, the invisible, the yawn that never comes. And for some, the absence is permanent. Some neurological conditions reduce social mirroring altogether, not just yawns, but expressions, gestures, reactions. Traumatic brain injuries, certain personality disorders, or degenerative diseases can change the way a person engages with others' signals. The mirror, once responsive, may become dim. This can be painful to witness, especially in loved ones. The stillness where reflection once lived can feel like distance, but even there, something may remain, a touch, a breath, a memory. The echo isn't always gone. Sometimes it's just quiet. So tonight, as you lie here and think of the ones who don't catch yawns, or the times you didn't, you might find yourself feeling a little softer, a little more forgiving. The mirror doesn't need to work all the time. Connection doesn't always announce itself in obvious ways, because sometimes the deepest form of empathy is allowing space for difference, letting others reflect or not reflect on their own terms, knowing that we each carry different rhythms, different mirrors, different ways of saying I'm here. And even in the absence of a mirrored yawn, presence can still be felt, a held gaze, a pause in conversation, a shared silence. So if you ever find yourself sitting across from someone, waiting for the yawn that never arrives, don't worry. The connection might still be there, just quieter, just elsewhere, and here in this moment, with your breath steady and your thoughts dissolving into softness. You can rest in the knowledge that whether you catch the echo or not, whether you feel mirrored or still, your body is doing what it knows how to do, responding in its own quiet, perfect way. You don't need to be contagious to be connected. You don't need to mimic to belong. The breath still comes. The body still speaks. And somewhere, even if you don't see it, someone else is breathing with you. You stay with that breath now, not reaching, not resisting, just letting it arrive and depart on its own time. As it does, a delicate sense unfolds within you that the yawn, so often mistaken for a simple sign of sleepiness, might be something else entirely, something subtler, something between. Yawns don't always come at the end of energy. Sometimes they arrive right before something begins. You've probably noticed it, those strange, quiet yawns that show up just before an important moment, before stepping on stage, before a long drive, Before a conversation that matters, your body pulls in air, stretches open, and then releases, not to sleep, but to prepare, as if it's closing one chapter and gathering itself for the next. And it's here you begin to understand that a yawn is more than a reaction. It's a transition, a blink between states. Just as blinking clears the eyes and resets your visual world, yawning seems to reset your internal one. A breath that wipes the slate clean, a momentary suspension, like lifting the needle from a spinning record, then placing it gently back down in a new groove. You felt it in the middle of a long afternoon. Your focus begins to blur. Your body slips into autopilot, and then there it is, a yawn, long, slow, grounding, and when it's over, something has shifted. You return, not quite energized, but different, more settled, more here. Scientists have suggested that yawning may help regulate arousal levels in the brain, not arousal in the romantic sense, but in the spectrum of alertness, not too wired, not too dull, just right. A neurological recalibration, a breath based dimmer switch. When you're overstimulated, a yawn might bring you down. When you're sluggish, it might pull you slightly upward, not enough to startle or jolt, but just enough to move you toward balance, toward readiness, toward clarity. It's like the brain saying, "Let me try again. Let's reset." You may have even noticed yawning during meditation or moments of deep relaxation, not because you're bored, but because your system is shifting gears, downshifting from thought to stillness, from doing to being. The yawn arrives like a bridge between mental postures, and if you pay attention, you'll see that this happens all the time. Yawns tend to appear at thresholds, before sleep, after waking, before a new task, after an emotional release. They're not just punctuation marks, they're hinges, tiny rotations that turn the page. There's something deeply poetic about that your body, without needing permission, creates these soft markers of change, that it knows when you're about to cross from one state into another, and offers a breath to help you cross gently, even emotionally. The pattern holds. Think of how often you yawn after crying, or before a difficult conversation, or in the still moment following a shock. It's not fatigue. It's your nervous system stepping from one room to another, closing the door behind it. You begin to see the yawn as a pause that belongs to no one state, but exists in between, like standing on a threshold with one foot in each world, like dusk, not day, not night, but something beautiful all its own. This might be why yawns are so hard to classify. They don't neatly belong to any single category. They're not solely about sleep or focus or boredom or empathy. They're about movement, about what comes next. And maybe that's why they're so contagious, because transitions often ripple. One person's shift creates a subtle wave that others feel, even if unconsciously. A classroom begins to fade into afternoon stillness, and the yawns spread. A family winds down for the night, and one by one, the echoes begin, not because everyone is tired at once, but because everyone is moving together across the same invisible bridge. You might even feel that now, your breath a little slower, your limbs a little heavier, not asleep, not fully awake, just drifting along the in-between. And that's what the yawn honors, that state of almost, of nearly, of not yet, but soon. It's a kindness, really, a way for the body to acknowledge its own flux, to say, I'm not where I was, and I'm not yet where I'm going, but I'm moving. You may have experienced this most clearly in travel, on a long flight or train ride, when your destination is still far off, but the old world has already slipped away. You stare out the window. Time loses its edges, and somewhere in that fog, a yawn forms, not out of tiredness, but out of passage. The body yawns when it doesn't know what else to do with the transition, when stillness and movement blend, when endings and beginnings overlap. It fills the space with breath, because that's the softest way to say, I'm changing. And you don't have to understand all the changes. You don't have to name them. You only have to breathe through them. To let your body do what it's always known, shift softly, even now. You may feel it approaching, a quiet flutter behind the eyes, a warmth building in the chest, the jaw ready to open. It's not boredom. It's not withdrawal. It's your body saying, let's move on, but gently. And as you let the next breath come, you begin to realize something small but beautiful. The transitions don't have to be hard. They can be soft, almost invisible. Just a breath, just a blink, just a yawn. So here you are, resting not in one state or another, but in the lovely blur between them. And perhaps that's where the deepest peace lives. Not in arrival, not in departure, but in the space in between. The yawn, then, is not a conclusion. It's a becoming, and you are already on your way. That place you've entered now, the space between what was and what comes next, has its own language. It doesn't speak in sentences or ideas. It speaks in sensation, in rhythm, in motion. And nowhere is that more visible than in the simple, flowing shape of a yawn. You've felt it 1,000 times, maybe more, but how often have you truly noticed it? That slow, inevitable build, the soft ache blooming in your jaw, the ripple moving down your neck, the widening of your throat, the pull of your cheeks, the long intake of air that doesn't just fill your lungs, it expands you. A gentle kind of opening, like unfolding a tightly packed cloth. There's structure in a yawn, a choreography, a beginning, a middle, an end. It often starts quietly, almost imperceptibly, a tickle in the throat, a slight tension near the temples, a sigh that doesn't fully form, and then there it is. The mouth stretches open, the jaw shifts down and forward, unhinging ever so slightly. The eyes close or squint, as if bracing for the swell. Your chest rises, shoulders might follow, arms, sometimes, reach out in sympathy, stretching wide like wings in slow motion. You breathe in, not just deeply, but differently. It's not the breath of speech or exertion or focus. It's a breath without purpose, except to reset, to renew, to realign something that doesn't need fixing, only loosening, and then comes the release. A sigh, often soft, sometimes audible. The body relaxes, the stretch contracts, your mouth closes, the eyelids flutter, and in that trailing moment, you feel different, not transformed, but shifted, lighter, as if something moved through you, not taken away, but rearranged. It's this physicality, this gentle stretch across so many parts of you, that makes the yawn feel like more than just a breath. It's a full body gesture, a wordless reset button, one that doesn't need to explain itself. In fact, The very act of yawning is so ingrained in your nervous system that it bypasses most of your conscious control. You can't truly choose when to do it. You can fake it, of course, but it doesn't feel the same. The tension, the surrender, the softness, they're not easily imitated. Your body knows the difference. It knows what a real yawn feels like, and it waits for it. Even when you try to stop a yawn, to hold it back in the middle of a meeting or a conversation, your body often insists. It may come out quieter, smaller, hidden behind a hand, but it comes because the pattern is already underway, moving through the steps, unwinding the tightness, and it won't leave until it's done. There's something comforting about that even when the world asks you to be still, to stay composed, your body quietly rebels with softness, a reminder that you are not just thought and posture. You are muscle and breath and rhythm. And have you ever noticed how a yawn makes you close your eyes, even if only for a second? That tiny blink of surrender? It's not just a muscle reflex, it's a pause, a moment when you stop seeing the world and instead feel yourself in it, a fleeting second of inwardness, of self. The world disappears, and for just a breath's length, all that exists is your body, in motion, resetting itself. That may be why yawning can feel so restorative. It doesn't solve problems, it doesn't provide answers, but it gives you space, space to be, space to shift, space to feel. Even the involuntary nature of it becomes a kind of gift. You don't have to earn a yawn. You don't have to plan for it. It arrives when it needs to, like rain on a thirsty plant. Soft, quiet, timed by something deeper than thought. Some researchers believe yawning may help lubricate the joints in your jaw, or circulate cerebrospinal fluid, or cool the brain ever so slightly, and perhaps it does. But here, in this moment, lying in the half light of your evening thoughts, none of that matters. What matters is the feeling, the stretch, the sigh, the slow reassembly of yourself after something unnamed has shifted inside you. You may not always be aware of when you need it, but your body knows, and the yawn responds. That's why they come in clusters sometimes. One yawn begets another, a series of openings, like ripples in still water, each one unlocking something the last didn't finish, each one carrying you a little deeper into ease, into rest, into that space where the mind quiets and the breath speaks. You've seen this in others too, the yawn that travels around a room, not from mimicry alone, but from shared state. The body saying what words never could. We're tired. We're slowing down. We're letting go. And isn't that a kind of magic? That a simple gesture, rooted in biology, shaped by muscle and breath, can feel so soulful, so intentional, even when it isn't. You might even feel one building now, a gentle tug behind the jaw, a warm tickle in your throat. Don't fight it. Let it come. Let it stretch through you like the opening of a window in a quiet room. You don't need to do anything else. No instructions. No expectations. Just breathes. Let the yawn have its shape, and let it carry you softly, slowly, into the next quiet unfolding. The room feels quieter now. Time has softened. Thoughts come more slowly, less urgently. You've followed the yawn through its shape, through the gentle mechanics of jaw and breath and sigh, and now, like a breeze shifting direction. Your mind begins to wander beyond yourself, out of the room, away from your own stillness, into the wild, because yawning, for all its quiet intimacy, is not a private invention. It doesn't belong only to humans. It lives across species, across ecosystems, across time. It is as much a part of the animal kingdom as fur or feathers, or the rhythm of migration. You picture a lion in the early morning sun, limbs draped over warm rock, eyes heavy with sleep. The yawn comes slowly, magnificently, jaw wide, tongue curled, breath pulled deep, not a gesture of danger, but of transition, of awakening, or maybe of nothing at all. And then, beside it, another lion yawns, then another. The wild has its own way of passing messages. Researchers observing animals in natural habitats have recorded yawning across an astonishing variety of species: mammals, birds, reptiles, even some species of fish, in wolves and chimpanzees, parrots and penguins, snakes and seals. The same pattern emerges: the open mouth, the full inhale, the long exhale, and sometimes the echo. You think of a group of bonobos huddled beneath trees in the heat of the day. One yawns, and within seconds, another follows. These aren't rehearsed behaviors. They're not taught. They're spontaneous, often contagious, just like they are in you, and yet they serve different roles in different animals. In birds, for instance, yawning may help regulate inner ear pressure or dislodge irritants, physical functions with no social meaning. But in species with more developed social structures, like dogs and apes, yawning takes on an added layer: communication. In chimpanzees, contagious yawning tends to occur more frequently among individuals with close bonds, just as in humans, emotional connection seems to enhance the likelihood of one yawn triggering another. It's a biological form of we're in sync, a coordination of nervous systems, a shared tempo of the body. Even in domesticated dogs, the yawn reveals quiet depths. Studies have shown that dogs are more likely to yawn in response to their human companions than to strangers, and most likely when their humans yawn first. It's not mimicry for its own sake. It's a physical nod to relationship, trust made visible through breath. And yet, yawning doesn't always mean the same thing from one species to another. In some animals, like snakes, yawning seems to appear before feeding, perhaps a way to adjust jaw alignment or reset muscular tension. In crocodiles, it may serve to cool the brain, much like the theories proposed for humans. And in fish, the answer is less clear. They gape their mouths wide in movements that look like yawns, though we're still not sure what they mean. But the resemblance is there, and it's strangely comforting to know that even underwater, far from air or language or mammalian brain structures, there are creatures moving through gestures that mirror your own. You begin to see yawning not just as something animals do, but as something that connects you to them, a thread woven through evolutionary time. It doesn't matter whether the purpose is social, neurological, or mechanical. The gesture persists, the breath continues. In some species, yawning may even play a role in social hierarchy. Among baboons, researchers have observed what they call threat yawns, exaggerated displays, teeth bared, signaling strength or warning. These aren't sleepy yawns. They're strategic, loud, visible declarations, I am not to be challenged. And that's where the meaning shifts again. Because in some contexts, a yawn is surrender. In others, it's assertion. In some, it's a simple stretch. In others, a soft call for harmony. Context, it seems, gives the yawn its purpose, just as it does in us. You think back to yourself now, to your own yawns, and how different they can feel. A tired yawn in the late afternoon sun, an awkward yawn in a meeting when you wish you didn't need to, a nervous yawn before something big, a peaceful one in the arms of someone you love. The action is the same. The meaning shifts, and that might be the most remarkable thing of all, that a gesture so universal can hold so many different stories, across species, across moments, across moods. Yawning is never just one thing. It's a vessel, a shape the body takes when it needs to say something without words. And in the wild, where language is made of posture and scent and breath, that matters. You imagine now a troop of meerkats resting in their den. One yawns, stretches, another follows. A bird in the trees overhead yawns, feathers shifting with the movement. Somewhere nearby, a fox lifts its head, mouth wide, eyes closing as it exhales the night away. They're not talking, but they're speaking, and so are you, in your own quiet room. With your own stillness, your body becomes part of that conversation. The breath you take is not so different from the one carried by lions or wolves or distant unseen whales beneath the sea. The shape of your yawn is a shape that has traveled through time, unbroken, unchanging, necessary. There's comfort in that even in your most solitary moment, you are part of something larger, something shared, something that doesn't require translation. Because the wild does not need words to understand the language of transition. It listens in breath, it speaks in sighs, and when it stretches its jaw wide and pulls in that long, unhurried breath, the world shifts ever so slightly, and so do you. And now, carried gently by the wind of the wild, you return, still slow, still soft, back to yourself, back to the quiet interior of the body, where feelings often arrive before names. You've explored yawning as reflex, rhythm, mimicry, and message. But there's something else too, something subtler. A yawn, after all, is not always what it seems. Sometimes, a yawn wears a disguise. You've likely felt this before, in moments not of rest, but of tension. You're sitting in a waiting room, heart ticking louder than it should, or standing in line before a hard conversation, or watching someone approach, the weight of something unspoken pressing between you. And then it comes, not a sigh, not a stretch, but a yawn, wide, deep, unexpected. But you're not tired. This is something else. Your body has found its own way of diffusing discomfort, a quiet way of venting pressure, of softening edges too sharp to name. The yawn becomes a kind of release valve, an unconscious way to let go of what you haven't admitted you're holding. In the language of the nervous system, this isn't strange. It makes sense. Yawning activates the parasympathetic branch of your autonomic nervous system, the rest and digest system, the one that counters stress, the one that calms. It's as though your body, sensing unease, tries to regulate itself from the inside out. Breathe deeply, reset, let go. You might have noticed this during arguments or emotionally charged moments. Someone you love is crying. Someone you're afraid to disappoint is quiet. The tension in the room is palpable, and then one of you yawns. It's not rudeness, it's not disinterest. It's the body's quiet attempt to bring you back from the edge. And once you see this, you begin to recognize it in more places. Public speaking, test taking, even laughter too long or too loud can leave you yawning. Not from fatigue, but from the way your body tries to recover from intensity. The wave crests, and the yawn arrives like foam on the shore. Sometimes, the yawn is a peace offering to yourself. There are those who yawn in moments of boredom, too, of course, but boredom is rarely simple. It's a cousin of restlessness. It shares roots with disconnection, uncertainty, a kind of displaced energy. You're not engaged, not immersed. You're hovering. The yawn, once again, appears, not as an insult to the moment, but as a bridge, an attempt to move from nowhere into somewhere. Your body is always trying to get you back into balance. The yawn is one of its gentlest tools, and yet, there's another layer still. Yawns can also be masks, tiny veils behind which we tuck discomfort, embarrassment, even grief. In social settings, a yawn can be an escape route, a way to step away from something awkward without drawing attention. We yawn to deflect, to disappear, to say, I need a moment, without having to explain why. It's subtle, but it happens. You might catch yourself doing it in a crowded room where you feel out of place, or during a conversation that brushes too close to something personal. The yawn arrives like a smokescreen, and you let it because it's quiet, it's accepted, and it gives you space. You may also see this in others. Someone yawns while listening to you, not because they're uninterested, but because they're overwhelmed. Their nervous system is full. Their brain is trying to keep up. The yawn is not dismissal, it's self-soothing. And when you begin to understand this, your interpretation of yawns changes. You stop seeing them as just signs of fatigue or disengagement. You start to read them as signals, as responses, as translations of something deeper. Not all yawns are shared, not all are caught, but each one carries something: emotion, regulation, transition, protection. And because the yawn is so ancient, so widespread, it gets to speak many languages at once. One breath, many meanings. This complexity is mirrored in the brain. The act of yawning doesn't originate from a single place. It involves multiple systems, those responsible for breathing, for awareness, for emotional regulation. There's no singular yawn center. Instead, it's like a network lighting up, a quiet conversation among different parts of you, deciding now. Now would be a good time to reset. That's why it happens in such varied circumstances, why it feels different depending on the moment. It's not always the same message, even when the gesture looks identical. And sometimes the message isn't even for you. Yawning can be social strategy. In some animals, and sometimes in people, it may serve as a way of signaling calm, diffusing tension, or redirecting focus. Think of someone in a group who yawns loudly. They may be drawing attention, yes, but not always consciously. The body speaks before the mind interprets. A yawn might mean, let's slow down. I'm ready to shift. I don't know how to say what I'm feeling. It's not always the truth, but it's always a clue. So as you rest here, In the hush of this section, you might begin to revisit your own memories. All the moments when a yawn came unexpectedly, before a goodbye, after a surprise, in the middle of being watched. What were you really feeling? What were you trying to release? And how many times did you catch someone else's yawn, not realizing what it carried? Even now, one may be blooming behind your eyes, unannounced. Maybe it's sleepiness, or maybe it's the body's way of saying, this moment is full. Let's soften it. You don't need to know why. You only need to let it come. Let the breath open you. Let the eyes close for a second longer. Let the moment pass through, because sometimes the yawn is not a need for rest, but a signal of readiness, a clearing of space, a stepping back into balance. And when you begin to see yawns this way, not as one thing, but as many, you find yourself becoming gentler with yourself, with others. You listen more closely, not just to words, but to breath. You begin to understand that everything your body does, even the smallest, most automatic gestures, has meaning, and often the quietest ones speak the loudest. And now, with the weight of all these meanings folded gently into your breath, you begin to feel what may have been quietly true all along, that a yawn is not just a solitary moment, but a whisper of connection, not loud, not demanding, just a shared breath across the space between beings, even when that space feels wide, even when no words are spoken at all. You think of the last time it happened, of the quiet echo of a yawn shared between you and someone else. Maybe it was small, unnoticed, wrapped in the routine of a late evening. Or maybe it was one of those odd moments where you locked eyes and laughed at how quickly the yawn traveled from one face to another, like a joke told without sound. Whatever the shape, it lingered, not because of its strangeness, but because of how it made you feel briefly in sync with someone else. And that's what a contagious yawn really is, a shared moment of alignment, a physiological nod that says, I see you, I feel you, we're in the same rhythm now. There's no need to announce it. There's no need for awareness. It's a kind of social shorthand the body writes before the mind even picks up the pen. You begin to wonder if this is why yawning feels different around people you love. Why a quiet evening beside a close friend or partner, even in silence, can lead to an entire stretch of yawns traded back and forth, like waves lapping between two anchored boats. No intention, no imitation, just a mutual exhale, one body adjusting its breath to the other's, without thinking, without trying. Because in that moment, connection isn't something you do, it's something you are. The simplicity of it all is what makes it beautiful. In a world where communication so often feels crowded with noise, expectation, and misunderstanding, the yawn arrives without any of that. It doesn't ask for attention. It doesn't seek meaning. It simply offers a breath, a shift, a moment of openness. And in return, it might receive the same. Even in groups, you can feel it. The soft wave of yawns moving through a room when the energy drops. A meeting stretching too long. A classroom fading into late afternoon. A living room glowing in the last light of day. One person yawns, and then another, maybe a third. A chain reaction of quiet bodies tuning to the same frequency. It's not boredom. It's not disrespect. It's resonance. You're watching nervous systems synchronize. It's no coincidence that contagious yawning shows up most in species with strong social bonds. Wolves, elephants, primates, humans, creatures who live together, move together, rest together. For us, survival wasn't about strength alone, it was about attunement, knowing when the group was tired, knowing when to shift from vigilance to stillness, and perhaps the yawn, small and strange as it is, helped carry those messages. You see this now not as quirk, but as evolution's quiet genius, a way of saying, we're ready to rest now, without having to speak, without risking alertness, without drawing attention, just breath signaling breath, the body speaking in its oldest language. And somehow, in today's world, a world of glowing screens and schedules and distractions, the yawn still does this. It still finds its way into the spaces where people gather, still pulls them into sync, even briefly, even online. It finds a way. You may have experienced this yourself. Watching a video of someone yawning, reading the word again and again, the idea alone is enough. Your mirror neurons fire. Your throat begins to widen. Your breath shifts without request. It's astonishing, really, that something so embodied, so primal, can travel across pixels and syllables, that even the suggestions of a yawn can ripple through the nervous system as if it had come from someone sitting right beside you. Because in some small way, it has. You don't need proximity to feel connection. You just need openness, receptivity, willingness to let another breath stir your own. And when that happens, even quietly, something sacred takes place. It's the moment where the wall between you and them grows thinner, not erased, just more porous. You remain yourself, and yet you move with them. You respond, you let their rhythm touch yours, and that, in its softest form, is empathy, not the kind that speaks in grand gestures or declarations, the kind that lives in bodies, in breath, in the stillness between moments. A contagious yawn is not about imitation, it's about resonance. The way tuning forks hum together when brought close, the way birds adjust their wings mid-flight to maintain formation, the way your breath deepens when someone you care about sighs. It's the body recognizing sameness, safety, presence. And in a world that can so often feel overwhelming or isolating, the idea that your body still knows how to connect, quietly, wordlessly, is something to treasure. So you rest a little deeper now, knowing that each breath you take may be shared, echoed, by someone else, even if they are far away, even if you never see them. Your body still reaches out, still invites, still listens, and if your own yawn rises now, as it very well might, let it come. Let it stretch through you like a ripple across still water. Let it be what it is, a breath you didn't plan, given to you by something older than thought, shared with a world that breathes back. Because every time you yawn with someone, or because of someone, or near someone, you are not just catching a reflex, you are catching a moment, and in that moment, you are not alone. So here you are. The room around you has gone quiet now, hasn't it? Not silent, no. There's still the soft murmur of your own breath, the gentle ticking of time, the subtle music of a world winding down. But everything feels a little farther away, softer. You've wandered through the wilds of yawns and rhythms and shared breath, and now you've arrived at the final edge of the journey. Not a conclusion, just a slowing, a final exhale, and maybe that's what a yawn has always been preparing you for. Not just sleep, not just change, but this feeling, this soft float between thoughts, this tender descent into somewhere deep and wordless, the last stretch before rest. As your body settles deeper into comfort, you begin to feel the full arc of the story your breath has been telling all along. Yawning was never about interruption. It was never about boredom. It was a rhythm, a pattern unfolding over time, weaving through species and stories and states of being. You were never meant to fight it. You were meant to follow it. Follow it the way you follow the tide out at dusk, until the sea is low and still and the shore glows silver under a tired moon, or the way you follow the slow circling of clouds just before the first stars appear, the way you follow your own pulse when the world finally quiets and your heartbeat feels like an old friend humming under your skin. That's what this moment is for. Not thinking, not solving, just being. You've learned that yawning is a bridge between wakefulness and sleep, between self and other, between restlessness and surrender. It carries you from the outer world to the inner one. And now, that bridge has brought you here, softly, slowly, to this final threshold. There's no need to cross it quickly. Let yourself pause. You're allowed to linger in this moment, to drift in that place where your mind isn't asking for anything and your body isn't performing for anyone. You've earned this quiet. There's something sacred about the stillness that follows understanding. Not the stillness of emptiness, but of fullness, the kind that hums gently beneath the skin, the kind that says, I've heard the story, I've felt it in my body, and now I can rest. So take a breath. Let it be slow, soft, unrushed. Feel the weight of your limbs, the softness in your jaw, the way your eyelids grow heavier, not from fatigues, but from permission. Permission to rest, permission to let go. And if another yawn comes, let it. Let it stretch through you one final time, like a thread being gently knotted at the end, a signal, not of an ending, but of a return, to breath, to rhythm, to you. You remember now, the yawn is not just a signal of tiredness, but a celebration of transition, a way for your body to say, I'm ready, ready to shift, to surrender, to dream. So dream. Let the breath carry you. Let the quiet hold you. Let the story you've just heard echo not in your mind, but in your breath. A story written in sighs and rhythms, in the soft language of the nervous system. You don't need to recall every detail. Your body already remembers the feeling. That's all it needs. And if you're still awake, barely, know that's okay too. Maybe you stayed for the whole story. Maybe you drifted away halfway through. Either way, the breath did its work. The yawn passed through you like a cloud passing over the moon. Soft, necessary, natural. If you feel at peace now, I'm so glad. And if sleep finds you in the next breath, even better. But if you're still gently hovering between thoughts, eyes half closed, I'll leave you with one last image. Picture a quiet boat on still water, the sky a dusky gray, the stars just beginning to blink into view. The boat doesn't rush, it rocks, slowly. The oars rest beside you, forgotten. There's nowhere to go. You're already where you need to be. Around you, The air is cool and calm. A breeze stirs the surface of the water. A bird calls once, softly, and then is silent. The world holds its breath, and so do you. You lie back, the boat cradling you. You feel the rhythm of the water beneath you, the gentle sway of your own breath. It matches the hush of the universe. In, out, in, out. And somewhere, on a shore you'll reach in your dreams, someone else yawns too. Maybe they're thinking of you. Maybe they don't know why. But the breath connects you just the same. One rhythm, one stillness, one gentle thread across the night. Sleep well now, and if you're already asleep, let this last sentence dissolve into your dream like a falling star you won't remember, but will feel in your bones